Hi everyone, welcome to our new episode of Beyond Labels. With me today, I've got Cassandra Hughes, the CEO of Down Syndrome WA. She's our speaker for today, and I've got our lovely Pam today forced to be with us. But we're going to have another very interesting episode where we're going to get to know Cassandra, what she does as a CEO, the group that she leads, and all we can about, Down Syndrome WA. Welcome, Cassandra.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. We were looking forward to it. So
yeah, this is an interesting one.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Not saying the other ones aren't interesting.
No. But it's good to know about,
Yeah.
you hear about Down Syndrome WA, then until you are part of the organization in any ways, working or with someone with Down syndrome, that or you get to know what you guys really do.
Yes.
So let's start from the beginning. What is Down Syndrome WA?
We are an organisation that supports families and people with Down syndrome to live a life of possibility.
Okay. And how did you do that?
So we started in 1986, driven by parents. So parents formed the association wanting to know more, have more, and I guess have more advocacy for their young people with Down syndrome. So it became an association, and paid officers started around about 20 years later, in all honesty. So we do a range of things today, but a lot of it is built on the foundations that those incredible founding members, I guess, put together and saw the need for. So we've just really continued to build on what they have done. And so we offer social group programs from birth to old age. We offer employment program. We run a playgroup, 2 playgroups actually, weekly. We have activities once a month for 6 to 11 year olds, once a month for teens, and once a month for adults. We run getaways, but most importantly, I like to say we're the shoulders and the hands, the shoulder to cry on and the hand to hold when things maybe aren't going as well as people would like them to be. They're challenged by systems or circumstances. There's still some discrimination in the world, particularly in some industries where we all need to be on a daily basis. So we often get called in to do advocacy work and support, but really we're there to make sure that people with Down syndrome get to experience the best possible life that they choose.
That's great. So when someone knows beforehand, when someone is pregnant and they know that it's going to have a child with Down syndrome, and if I do something wrong, please correct me.
Of course.
So then they can contact you.
Absolutely. So we have a close relationship with most of the hospitals and with their social work teams. So when a parent is given the news that they have a high likelihood of having a child with Down syndrome, we will sometimes get a referral from the hospital, and alternatively, it might be that the parent finds out about us through word of mouth, or they Google and find us. We're quite easy to find. But in that early stage, we do prenatal and postnatal visits. So we still have quite a number of postnatal diagnoses, but we'd also see a lot of parents prenatally. The one thing about us that I really want people to understand is there are no rose-coloured glasses and there is no bias for us. We understand everybody's right to choose. So at that point, when we go to a prenatal visit with someone, we tell them what life is like. And we do that with people who have lived experience. So they have a genuine,
peer
understanding peer connection
Yeah.
between them and the family. And then the family choose. And we sometimes hear from them, and we sometimes never hear from them again. So, but from that prenatal, for those that continue and they have their child, we then do in-home visits, we do hospital visits. We have a gorgeous new parent pack that we take out to new parents with, really cute teddy and some things for mum, and it makes people immediately feel that there's always going to be somewhere to turn. And that's our goal, is we never want people to feel they don't have somewhere to go. So that's really important. And then from there, our goal, the reason we run social programs, is to keep that connection for people through each of those life transitions. So going to school, leaving school, going from primary school to high school, going into work. Because each time, one of the things we find is each time our children change from one area to another, they do that transition, friendship groups change. That's can be really challenging. So having a community of support around you is also hugely valuable. So that's our focus, is to keep community around people right across their lifespan.
That's great. And how many people do work for the Down syndrome?
Not enough. So we have including myself, I have 10 in our core team. But in our core team, 4 of those people only work once a month.
Oh, wow.
So we have a FTE of just under 5. So we deliver, a big shout out to everyone that works for us. We have an incredible team, and they give so much. And to put out the work that we put out with a FTE of less than 5, frankly, I think's killing it, really.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is, because I know about the social groups, and they're amazing, and people, have fun with people their own age.
Yes.
Which is sort of missing, it's especially between teen and young adult ages.
Yeah.
Not only for people with Down syndrome, but across the board in the disability community.
Yes.
'Cause
Agreed.
it's just, everyone is asking, okay, a group for a teenager,
Yeah.
where do I go?
Yes.
And
It's really important. And we know that for our teens, that connection is really important for their long-term growth and development into adulthood. And so running the social programs, we run a holiday program now twice a year as well, January and July. Again, for children who, their parents work and they want to do something engaging. So we'll do 3 days, 1 week of the holidays, and 3 days the next week of the holidays. And they start to really look forward to that, because, I've got my friend, we don't go to the same school, we don't live in the same area, but I've got this friend. And I see them a couple of times a year. And then also building into that monthly social program. So we're building connections, and we're seeing improvement in that connection between young people. And that in no way advocates that we don't want people to socialise more broadly, because we do. I mean, true inclusion is when you're out in the community, you're with other people with disability, without disability, with different disabilities, in different sports and different social groups. But that sense of community comes from a community and a community you trust. So we have 14 Facebook groups. We have a public page, and then we have a whole of association. We call it our family support network. And then we have another 12 pages, and they are all for very specific groups of people. So they're targeted to the playgroups, and then the kids club, and then the friends 5 and the adults, but also regional. So we have 5 regional pages. So we've brought together regional people that didn't know one another, living within the same vicinity, but regionally the same vicinity could be 200 kilometres. So we've just seen a couple of families drive into one of our regional centres to go to a gathering of families, and that's really heartwarming, because there's value in in community. And we live in a world where community's disappearing. And I think we all feel that, and we feel the isolation of living in a suburb, going to a big school, working in a big place, and that sense of community is hard to gather. And I think that's why sport's so successful, because it brings a sense of community. So for us, I think that's such a key, is to work out how we continue to deliver community inside of all of the funding constraints and all of the things that impact us as an association.
Exactly.
That's the joy of social media as well, of being able to facilitate that for the families.
It's been such an incredible tool. COVID obviously struck us in WA after the pandemic started, but our team had already started working on how would we deliver some social group programs online, and they did such a great job. And then obviously we were then struck with open borders and seeing COVID in our communities, and having to have an event and then not have an event, and being able to keep everyone connected has been really powerful. And our family support network, on that page, because you must be a member of Down Syndrome WA and you must have a child with Down syndrome or be the carer of a child with Down syndrome to be on the page, it's a safe place. It's a safe place to say, this is happening with my child. Did this happen to anyone else's child? And people go, oh yeah, actually, it's okay. Yeah. And we went here to get some help with that. Or, do we know a great paediatrician, or do we know a great, allied health professional of some sort? And people go, oh, I live in your area and I use Fred. And Fred's great, you know. So that, I think the social media has been brilliant. We try to have our big events every year where we bring people together. And, if I've done nothing else in this role in 3 years, is I have a really strong sense of wanting to bring our whole community together, whether you're 45 and have Down syndrome or whether you're 4 months old. You and your families are always welcome, and that's to build community.
Yeah.
That's the hand-holding part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and get lots of hugs.
Yeah.
So in that sense of community, I'm guessing you rely on volunteers.
To some extent, we'd love more. We don't have a lot of volunteers within our association now, and as you would know, volunteering has taken an incredible dive over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So we do have some.
Yeah.
We have a number of support workers that we employ just casually that come to events to help us run our social programs. And the little people, so playgroup and the primary school age children, their parents stay. So the networking for parents is really great.
Yeah.
And we got great feedback saying, these events are fantastic, but it would be really nice if they were doing something so we could all network some more. And it's really great for the parents to be able to have that time to network. And once people reach teenage years and adult years, that parental engagement is not so strong. And so hence our community activities at the gala and the World Down Syndrome Awareness Month in October, the World Down Syndrome Day in March, and all of the other things that we do. We really do want our community to be there. It's not about anything else. It is literally, we want you to be there. We want you to come, and we want you to see people you might not have seen. We had a family come to one of our galas maybe last year or the year before and catch up with a family they hadn't seen since their prenatal diagnosis, and their children were in their mid-20s.
Wow.
So they ran into the person that was their prenatal
For the
buddy,
meeting.
want of a better word back then. So I don't know, there's this beautiful sense within this community, and we had a siblings camp earlier this year. It was a really remarkable experience to see the kind of young people that siblings are, and their incredible empathy and acceptance of the world in general. They were a remarkable group of young people. It was very inspiring to see these young siblings get together, and it was fantastic. We were part of some Telethon Kids Institute research, and that was able to be facilitated through the research project, and it was just phenomenal. So it's when you see that community part of it and you think, this is so worthwhile. who we are and what we deliver is so worthwhile. And you have to remember that, especially on the hard days.
Yeah.
What's beautiful is you support the whole family.
Whole family.
It's not just the person with Down syndrome or the immediate carer.
Yeah.
Which is really lovely.
Yeah, and we have aunts and uncles and grandparents on our database. They come to Step Up. They'll come to the gala. We see whole tables of families at the gala, which is beautiful.
Talking about that. What do you do in October with the awareness?
Yeah, big month for us. So October the 6th, if that's the Sunday, is Step Up and Dance for Down syndrome. It's normally Step Up for Down syndrome, but this year we've decided instead of walking, it seems to be some people's least favourite thing to do, we decided to do one of their most favourite things, which is to dance. So we're having Step Up and Dance for Down syndrome.
Wow.
So a Taylor Reserve, and everyone's welcome. There's an entry fee. You book online. People can come and support the community.
We're gonna give the details and
amazing. Thank you.
Address and all of that, so everyone can come.
Thank you. And then in 2 weeks later, October's quite busy. 2 weeks later, we attend the Telethon Family Festival. We are incredibly fortunate to be a Telethon beneficiary. They are the most wonderful support to Down Syndrome WA for our early years programs. I'd have nothing to talk to you about if I didn't have Telethon support, and they are incredible. So we always attend their family festival, and we're really looking forward to that. We've got a really great idea this year, and it's really wanting to say thank you to Telethon and to all of the people that donate to Telethon that enables us to do the things we do. So we're excited for that. And then, crazily, on the 27th of October, which is also a Sunday, I'm doing a triathlon course as a awareness and fundraiser for Down Syndrome WA. So that's a 1.5k swim, a 40k ride and a 10k run. I'm not sure how I'm not asleep at the table. So the month is quite big. We also then have a 31 days awareness campaign. So I've just emailed a whole lot of people today and said, okay, you haven't submitted a story, but I know you have one to tell. So how about you put in your story? So our plan is to highlight 1 or 2 stories every day for the 31 days of October, really with a success, and that could be at 2.5 my child walked. Whether we're not measuring the success, but that was a success.
Exactly.
And it might be that my child walked a year. It doesn't matter. And it could be that I play piano, but it's all about what is the possibility. And then there's a lot of myths about Down syndrome. And so what we asked parents to do was, if there's some kind of myth that you think your story busts, then tell us that as well. So that's really, I'm looking forward to getting the stories. We've got about 3 or 4 in so far. And West Australians, they don't like to do anything early. Like, come on guys, book early. Give me the stuff early, it'd be great. Yeah. So, but no, we're on track. So we'll be doing 31 stories in all of our media, attending Step Up, having a great time and dancing, and then family festival, which will promote what we do as an association, and then the fundraiser at the end of the month to hopefully raise some awareness and some money.
So, just going on the story aspect, obviously joining an organisation like this just doesn't happen. Obviously there's a background story. Would you like to share that?
I have a story, yes. So in 2021, in August, I was invited by my niece, who has a little boy with Down syndrome, to attend the gala. So as a family, sisters, uncles, aunties, we all went and had the most fabulous time. And I was so inspired by the community. It was beautiful. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd been to. There were people with Down syndrome doing ballroom dancing. They spoke. The staff were incredible. It was just this warm, heartfelt, incredible evening. And the person that got up as the acting chairperson said they were the acting chairperson. I thought, oh, they've got a board position available, obviously. So I phoned on Monday morning, and 10 days later I ended up the CEO. So that was a whirlwind kind of
Yeah.
way. But I'm in the role because my niece Amy has a little boy called Hunter, and she has another little son called Ren, and because of her, I joined and have become the CEO. And unfortunately, we lost Amy in February of this year. So that has been a really difficult time for our community. Amy was much loved in the playgroup and the young community, and was just, a beautiful young mother of two incredible little boys. And we lost her earlier in the year, and her family asked at the time, so my sister and brother-in-law, if we could set up a fund in her name, which we have. So we have Amy's fund, and that fund is there to help us generate some income for mental health awareness and wellness for parents, because this is a taxing system. This is a taxing, challenging life for parents, and I think that's often overlooked. I think parents are very brave and stoic about their journey, because you have to get on with life, right? It's hard. And so I think that sometimes the challenges of that don't always come out, which is why I'm so passionate about community, because it's the place I want people to feel safe. But hopefully, as we raise funds for Amy's fund, we'll be able to run ongoing wellness programs, mental wellness programs for parents. So, it's a tragedy, but it leaves a legacy that we hope will be there forever to support families. And obviously we'll always be there to support, Cameron and Ren and Hunter, our beautiful little man that happens to have Down syndrome.
Yeah. We will get all the details for Amy's fund as well, so everyone can, be part of it and donate.
Thank you.
Because it is a really important cause. We people, that have lived experience, know how important keeping your mental health, in a healthy state.
Absolutely.
It is. And it isn't easy.
No.
It ain't easy. So having some help, having, a group, having advocates, having someone to turn to and say, I'm not doing well. Because as parents, we don't do that.
Of course not.
Because you have to get on with life.
Yeah, you've got school lunches to make and pickups and jobs to do and
Bills
washing
to pay.
and bills to pay and all of the things that life requires of us, and that doesn't magically stop because you have a child with a disability and this magical thing called the NDIS. That isn't how it works. How it works is this incredibly beautiful and challenging life, and we want to do everything we can to make that as workable as possible for people. And it's the beginning of a really challenging journey for us to know how we will do that. I know that saying to somebody, you need to take some rest, you need to watch what you eat, you need to eat good food, you need to sleep. Sure.
Yeah. I will.
Parents will just look at me and go,
tomorrow.
Sure. I'll leave that to the other people that aren't in my shoes. So we know that's not the way we're going to be able to deliver a message. We're going to have to find a creative and positive way and find a really great person to deliver that. So a professional that understands this world.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet, but we will I think within 6 months we'll be ready to run the first of hopefully our series of sessions, and there'll be a small cost for parents so we can keep the fund active.
Yeah.
Out of an absolute tragedy, at least we have a legacy, and we have the beautiful memories that we have as a family, but also as a community. As I said, she was very much loved inside of our community. So
yeah. And everyone in the community, everyone in WA and in Australia can donate, so you don't have to be part of Down syndrome WA. So, and nothing is too small, so
nothing,
every bit helps.
Yeah.
So you mentioned myths about Down syndrome.
Oh, I love them. I probably had them, to be honest, because I knew nothing. And I came into this world still knowing not a lot, because we just loved our little man that has Down syndrome for being the little man that he is.
Exactly.
But there's lots. I mean, I guess our favourite is, they're always so happy. I'm not sure that parents would always agree with you. And my experience, that's not always the case. Just like you and I, they have great days and bad days. They love some things and really don't like others. And they can be quite resilient in expressing their love or dislike for things, which I really love. I think also one of the things that people are often very challenged by with intellectual disability in particular is communication. And so there's this myth that if they don't speak, they don't understand. And I can assure you, nothing could be further from the truth, because you absolutely see the recognition in people's eyes when you speak to them, whether they can articulate in our way of articulating back to you. That's actually on us. So it's much more important that we work out, how do they communicate? Do they use a device? Do they use pictures? Do they use keyword sign? Do they use sign language? Do they use gestures? What is it? How is it that they communicate? And we have to get better at trying to be more open to the fact that people don't all communicate with verbal language. So that myth that, if I speak, they won't really understand me. That's not my experience in any way. And I get to work with our young adults predominantly, or the adults right across the spectrum predominantly, because we're not funded for adults. So we don't have any funding for our adult cohort. So I typically do the work in that space because there's no one funded to do it. And I love it. And that's probably one of the things I've learned the most, is never to take them for granted or to assume that they can or can't understand what you're saying, but to be better at learning to understand communication styles with however that looks. And we put tools in place. You can get pictures that they can point to whether they're happy or sad, or whether the day's great, or whether they want a pizza or a toasted sandwich. I mean, there's loads of ways to communicate, but people without disability tend to think that verbal communication is the only way we can do that, and that just isn't the case.
In any other, invisible disability, as we call them now. Communication is always a key for every person with or without a disability.
Yeah, and we're still, that the stereotype, and all of us in disability, I think, are constantly working toward breaking down the stereotypes about what disability is or is not, and what a person with disability who happens to have a disability, they're still a person first.
Yep.
And so I think there's still a lot of real genuine misunderstanding. Often there's what's perceived as, maybe arrogance or unwillingness to or discrimination is very often misunderstanding, where people have had no exposure to a person with Down syndrome or a person with another intellectual disability. And we find it easier to see a physical disability, and we're problem solvers typically. So we go, if we widen a door, or we change our access, or change the heights of things, and those things are really important. And I'm not for 1 second suggesting people with a physical disability don't also suffer other discrimination, but we tend to see things differently. But the invisible, or the disabilities like Down syndrome, where there's an intellectual component to their disability, I think is often very misunderstood. And so our job is to try to really use awareness months and awareness days and our voice to change those perceptions. Because we work in the employment space, and we only work in open employment, so we only look for roles that are fully paid, award wage, in a task or job that a person can do that is worth the award wage to the employer. So it's very much a partnership between the employer and the employee. And often it's about supporting system development in order for that young person to be able to do that job. It's rarely about their capacity. And but we don't put a person who wants to work in a hairdressing salon in a factory counting bolts. You've still got to be about choice and control. You've still got to be about dreams and goals and hopes.
They're just a person.
They're a person, and they want to do what they want to do. And sometimes people say, well, that's not realistic. Well, in its whole form, maybe not. But we're not going to judge that. What we're going to do is look for, would doing this element in this industry, would that fulfill you? Would that make you happy? Would that allow you to build some skills? And so, that program's been really eye-opening as well, helping educate employers about what's possible. Because we have 14 young people employed in full open employment, and that might be 3 hours a week, it might be 30 hours a week, depends on the young person. But everywhere from factories to offices, and it's long, it's slow, it's a hard process, but it's about changing the attitudes. And so if we can break down some of those barriers, I think for everybody with a disability, and particularly the hidden disabilities, I think that changes the world that we live in.
Yeah, certainly. And in terms of employment, you do it as a Down syndrome WA.
We do.
It's not that you have partnership with, let's say, APM.
No,
or...
they are brilliant at what they do. They deliver broad services to a very broad spectrum of people with disability, which is really essential. Mm-hmm. What we do is very bespoke. It allows us, because we know our members as well, and this is the benefit of being small. There's a lot of criticism about being small, and lots of people don't want to fund one tiny agency, they want to fund one big agency, and that's a challenge we face every day. But I know the difference it makes being small, and I know the value that it has being small. And so if someone's, if one of our members, let's use Fred again, we don't have anyone called Fred, so it's okay. If Fred came to me and, said, I want to work at, Maya, that's where we would go first. But it might not be that that's possible. Or, I want to, work in the tower at the airport because they've seen something on a television show. But we would never discount that. But what we might do is see, could we get a job at the airport? Or, is there a job that has some relationship to that job? So it's totally customised. Mm-hmm. It's bespoke. We find out what the person wants. We then go searching for it. It's tricky. And sometimes we have employers come to us as well saying, we've got this job. Do you have anybody that you think might suit them? And, thankfully, yes, often. But, we're a small community as well. There's only 1,100 people with an NDIS plan as Down syndrome as their primary diagnosis in Western Australia. So we're a small cohort. But they deserve exactly what everyone else has. So,
how can they contact if there's an employer that wants to employ someone? How they can contact you?
They can contact me. We have an employment coordinator.
Okay.
Her name's Stephanie, and anyone can contact us at Down Syndrome WA. We're pretty easy to find.
And we're going to put
we've got
contact
Facebook,
details.
we've got websites, and we're really easy to find. But and my email is on the website. So if people want to reach out to me, they can just reach out to me. It's easy.
Okay.
So we basically work with them, place them, and then they have a mentor. So an NDIS funded mentor. So our coordination is funded by currently a federal government project through Down Syndrome Australia. So I work with my counterparts around Australia, but the mentor is funded out of the person's NDIS plan, and they stay with them until they're independent. Okay. So as soon as they're independent, we're out. And I say to my mentors, your job is to do yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
So that's your job. So.
And if they lose their job, they've succeeded.
Absolutely, and then we give them someone else. Hopefully. Yeah, and to be honest, that's actually one of the biggest challenges, is because we don't always have continuity from one client who becomes independent to the next client who's just starting. Because we are small, it's really challenging for us to keep really good quality mentors and staff in that space. And the employment space, you would know, the employment space is hard in this sector, and to make sure you get really good quality people that understand your values and your ethos as an organisation, maintaining that is a difficult thing.
Did you get help from the government or private bodies like... No.
Thank you for asking. I can give you the exact breakdowns. We don't get any money from the state government. So Down syndrome Western Australia is not funded by the Western Australian government. And we, through our partnership with Down Syndrome Australia, so we're a voluntary part of, I guess, a collaborative called Down Syndrome Australia. Because they support then all of us around the country, they have quite a good success in federal grants. So through those federal grants, we do receive about 20% of our funding comes, or 25%. Then fundraising and donation, which, as anyone listening who's been involved in fundraising or donation, it is hard. It is a hard slog. Hence why the CEO is running a triathlon. If it was easy, I'd be laying on the couch watching Emily in Paris or something, equally as benign on my Sunday afternoon.
How many people, sorry to interrupt, how many people in WA are registered as a member in Down syndrome?
So we have almost 1,900 people in our database.
1,900 people. And the state government doesn't give any funding for those people, families?
No.
Wow.
No. So then we also do fee-for-service work. So mentors, that's a fee-for-service. We, our teens and our adult programs, because there isn't any funding for that work, we do that under their NDIS plan. So we're a registered NDIS provider. We follow all of the rules. We do all of the things. But to be honest, we just have this little bespoke piece of the world that we play in, which is the social and the employment. So our fee-for-service, and we do training and education for employers and social groups. And we just did a fantastic presentation for Aquamotion Swim School at Wanneroo. A big shout out to them, because they are so committed to doing well for people that come and have a disability. They got us to come in and we did a great talk with them, and they loved it, and the feedback was great, and it was just a really heartwarming exchange between them and us. And it was the first time we'd ever talked about swimming, and we had to do research. I mean, I didn't know anything about swimming and Down syndrome and all of those things, but there were some fascinating statistics, like the pressure of the water on your body releases dopamine. And I thought, I should have been swimming 20 years ago. But, there's things like that. And this year we've talked to the Santas that work at like the Westfields and places like that. So again, they're really engaged. They want to do a good job. And so they engage with us. And we did a fee-for-service training workshop with them. So there's, this great opportunity for us to educate and also earn a revenue. So one of my focuses has been, how do we become sustainable? How do you not rely on governments changed? Governments change, parties change, priorities change, and so you want to have a level of sustainability that protects you from those changes when you're committed to a strategy. Otherwise, your strategy ends up following the current flavour of what is seen as necessary or required, whereas where we would really like to be able to push forward with what we believe in as the strategy for the best outcome for people with Down syndrome in Western Australia.
Yeah,
so it's fascinating. There's so many different levels, and it's nobody chooses this. It just happens.
Yes,
it's just happens.
Yes, and someone needs to be there that is small enough to say, "Hey, Fred's mum, it's so lovely to see you. How you doing?" That's important. It's important work, and I'll never be swayed or lose my enthusiasm based on funding. My enthusiasm is always going to be about, and that of my team, our enthusiasm is always going to be about what we do for the person at the other end. And if we have to find different ways to fund or different ways to, one of my big goals now is to find corporate partners where there's a mutual benefit. I'm not asking for a handout. We don't want that, because then you're still stuck. But if you can form long-term corporate partnerships where we offer value to that organisation and they offer value to us, and that typically monetary is hugely valuable to us. But there are so many other ways. Staff development. How does a small organisation continue to grow the skills of their staff when you get beautiful emails that say, we've got this amazing course coming up and we've discounted it to $2,000? Where does that come from? And
you're not getting any support.
No, and we want to develop our staff, and we want them to grow, and we want them to, really be the best that they feel they want to be and can be. But that's just one of the small challenges that you face. And so for me, corporate partnerships, there's a lot of big businesses that run training courses for their staff that might be applicable to a small not-for-profit. The other one for a lot of us is where you're housed. So you're leasing, you might be leasing, in a small place or a big place. You pay lease fees at today Perth corporate rates. And, there are a lot of businesses, a lot of mid-tier businesses that have probably got 3 offices spare, or half a quarter of a floor of a building. And, there's lots of ways that people can help, not just us, but other small not-for-profits where, that community, you then are contributing back to a really important and valuable part of our community. So that's really my focus is to find really genuine reciprocal corporate partnerships where we can do something great for them, training, education, and it's really good if you can say, we do engage, we do understand. So as a corporate, that's a really valuable thing to be able to say, and that we work with this organisation that have lived experience. And then on our side to obviously help us with that future goal of, sustainability and what does that look like, and do we want to grow? Do we want to expand? There's a couple of the Down Syndrome associations in Queensland and the ACT, so they've expanded to Down syndrome and other intellectual disability. So, that's also a possibility, because we know that there are other syndromes similar to Down syndrome where there isn't an association because they're quite rare. So, there's all kinds of possibilities in the future, but you actually need capacity.
Exactly.
And we're at capacity. we're there.
We need volunteers.
Oh my gosh. Skilled volunteers as well.
Yeah.
So volunteers to come to events and activities, but also skilled volunteers who maybe are policy writers or marketing people or,
grant proposal people.
Exactly. People that want to give of their skills, the skills they've developed over a lifetime of a career, and be able to support small organisations. I think, skilled volunteering would be hugely valuable. Okay. But all volunteers, we'll take volunteers.
All volunteers.
You do have to have a police clearance if you're a volunteer with us. So just put it out there. That's just how it is.
Yeah. So I'm interested to know, why families decide not to be part of Down syndrome. If they have, it must be many, many reasons, but, why? Why would you decide not to be part of Down syndrome association?
I think some of the families that I've seen, that I've become aware of over time, it's because they have a beautiful family network. They have a close group of friends. Their children fit in at their school, and so they don't need that external support because they are well supported. They're well, and that's a totally fantastic actually thing. If everyone had that, you wouldn't need an association. But I think we do see times in people's lives when it changes, when advocacy changes, when school friends, when you leave and you go out into the workforce, maybe that the nature of those relationships changes. And so we have seen in the last 18 months in particular a return of a large number of older members, which has been amazing. I think also us growing and progressing to the needs of our members. So if we don't have anything to offer you if you're 40, why would you join? And I mean, I'm desperately trying to get funding for an aging project because it really is, for me, my big missing. So my big missing is what happens when people get older. And people with Down syndrome, so here's a fact that lots of people don't know. In 1984, the average lifespan of a person with Down syndrome was 28. 1984. Most of us were well and truly bouncing around the world quite happily in 1984. And in 2024, the average lifespan is 62.
Oh, wow.
That is a phenomenal change. But that has with it a significant amount of implication.
Why is that? Do you think?
So how did it change?
Yeah.
It's pretty much when institutionalization changed. So when people remained with families more consistently, healthcare has improved, the possibility, so the advocacy for people with disability has improved. There's a whole load of reasons, I think. But interestingly enough, it comes with a whole lot of challenges because for many years, parents always believed that they would outlive their child. And so tragic as that would be, there's a security in that. That's not occurring as much now. And so that whole future living, that whole, what do we do when mum and dad pass? You know, what happens to our beautiful young adult? Where do they go? Where do they live? Who do they live with? How will they be cared for? How will they be nurtured? You know, because there's lots of amazing places to live. But where does the nurture come from? And so that's the work that we are very desperate to do. So of all of the work that I would like to do now, that and regression disorder, which I can speak about if we have time, but aging is a really big gap right now. And it's a gap I have to fill. I have to find a way to provide some services, some courses, some education in that space because there's just not enough. There's just not enough, and there's not enough security, and there's not enough of knowing how do we maintain that nurture. So if someone does go into a SIL home, how do they stay connected with the community that maybe they've always known? And then where is that relationship? Because we're not that provider. So we do get invited to Christmas parties and birthday parties and 21sts, and that's just the nature of the work we do. My staff often get invited, you know, as friends to the community's events and activities because that's how people feel about them, because they're so good at what they do. They're so generous and kind and engaged. They're genuinely engaged in a community. And it's for a lot of my staff, it's a community of interest because they have a child with Down syndrome. And so it's a very real thing to want to be engaged. So the Aging Project is definitely a really enormous part of our future direction, and finding a way to fund work in that space is really important. You know, I really want to have a coffee club for over 40s. I just want to go for coffee with them once.
Come on, it must be someone out there
How good would that
listening.
be? Yeah.
So yeah, you know, and every help is welcome. So, you know, if you have any idea, if you have the space to offer to Down Syndrome WA to use it for the seniors member, that would be amazing.
Amazing. So many things we could do. There's just so many possibilities for how we can engage and to do better.
Exactly.
Every day there's always room to do better.
Yeah. Do you have...
Oh, we could be sitting here all day talking about this.
You mentioned the regression.
Yeah, so regression disorder only came on our radar about 2 years ago. I had 2 phone calls in a row within about 3 weeks of one another from 2 separate parents that could have been reading off that piece of paper word for word. It was hung up from the second one, quite emotional and quite, you know, devastated, thinking, I don't know anything about this and I don't know what to do. You know, I do live a lot in, if this is not in my wheelhouse, I don't know. So my job is to go and find out, because a lot of this is very unknown. So regression disorder is typically characterised as a paediatric condition, so it starts anywhere from sort of that 12 years onward. Most of the people in Western Australia that have presented with regressive symptoms are older than that, because possibly it wasn't recognised because it's very poorly understood. So we don't have a great understanding medically of regression in Australia in general. So there is an amazing clinic in Queensland, the Mater Institute, under Dr. Cathy Franklin. She's brilliant, but she's in Queensland, and she's only one person that can only do so many things, and she's incredible. And then we have a number of researchers around the world. So what we've done in WA, I guess, we've become really the leading advocate voice for people in Australia at the moment, and the other states will, they'll be taking that on as well, I think, over time. But we certainly, because we had a drive, we have 15 families with young people with regressive symptoms. So, and I can't say regression disorder because we have only one diagnosed.
Okay.
So getting a diagnosis is unbelievably difficult in this state, in all states, to be honest, because it's not very well understood. So what we've done, we've put together some tools. Our website's full of research papers. We've developed a tool that is like a checklist that came from our parents, really, that described all the different unusual things that happened to their child when they started to regress. And then on pages 2, 3 and 4 is information for doctors. So there's an information for GPs about what is regression disorder. There's a link to a whole ton of research papers and our website. Then there's a set of diagnostic tools, a diagnostic workup that needs to be done by a GP and or a neurologist and a psychiatrist. So what we've been able to do is identify, by talking to Jonathan Santoro, who's one of the leading researchers in the world, okay, what do we really need? What is the ideal mix for treatment? Diagnosis first and then treatment. So basically GP and then a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and probably both together. So it's thought that regression has some kind of psychosocial emotional trigger, that something happens in a young person's life, and that could be really awful, or it could be something that you and I might not understand as being serious. We might think that was quite a benign or normal thing that happened, but for a reason that we don't really understand, that young person, it has really impacted them. But sometimes we see the triggers, we know them, we realise what happened, and sometimes we don't. So what's really important is that we have a GP that can can do the preliminary diagnostics and do the referrals to psychiatry and to neurology, who can then do brain scans and all of the other things that need to be done, check for depression. So it's most commonly misdiagnosed as dementia. So a young person who's 20 who has Down syndrome is highly, 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 highly unlikely to have dementia. It's almost, I can't use the word impossible, very unlikely. And I'm not a doctor, but that's from all of the world's leading people we've spoken to and that have spoken on our behalf. And there's lots of videos on our website as well. So you go to the resources page and there's a whole section on regression disorder that I feel like has helped people a lot, because at least they're heard. We also have a support group. So we have a support group that we opened to other people in Australia to be able to jump on by teams to, just talk to other parents who are going through it. It's a really, it's an incredibly difficult time for parents and for the young person. But
and it's
watching
linked
the person
to Down syndrome.
Well, so regression does occur, my understanding is that it does occur in autism as well. There is an autism regression, but this is specifically related to I guess the research is around people with Down syndrome that get regression, and it's been called a few things over its lifespan. So it was actually discovered in 1942. We didn't do anything about it until only probably 10 or so years ago, when the research started and we started to see more people with regression, around the globe. And there's an amazing institute in LA, and that's where Jonathan Santoro works, and he's just phenomenal. And there's a lot of researchers, so in France and other places around the world, there's a lot of really great researchers doing great work in this space. We just need it to filter more, and we're trying really hard to be the advocate voice for, education and education for doctors. And because if you're a doctor, you may never see a person with Down syndrome in your medical career, let alone understand regression disorder. So we're not laying the blame or the fault at anybody's feet. We're just saying this is real. It's a real condition. And at the moment, there's only 2 understood treatments for it. So one is called IVIG, which is an intravenous immunoglobulin, which is a word I find really difficult to say, and that's through a drip. So our young person, I'm allowed to speak about Sarah, who has been diagnosed here in WA. She's in her late 20s now, and she has IVIG treatment, and she's gotten significantly better. So she's the only person that's had a diagnosis in WA. And then Dr. Franklin in Queensland uses a lorazepam treatment, which catatonia is quite typical in regression, so that catatonic kind of behaviour, and so she uses that with other treatments very successfully. So at the moment there's kind of a couple of treatments in the world, and I think it's tonight there's another seminar about some more research trials they've been doing around potentially other drugs that have a really positive similar outcome. So we've got our fingers crossed for that, because IVIG is not readily accepted as a treatment for this condition in Australia yet. I don't know if you know about the way our drug administration works and the PBS list and all of those things that are very complicated and above my pay grade, but they make it really hard to get IVIG as a diagnostic treatment for regression. But we are so fortunate to have a GP that I've met with, and they are now willing to support our community, and that has been a bit of a sigh of relief for us as a team, because it's really hard when you say, I can listen, full stop, because that's really all we've been able to do. But in essence, we've done a lot in the last year, and we've been working with Telethon Kids Institute on, maybe there's a project that we can work on, and a research project that we could partner with them on in the future. And so we're asking a lot of questions, we're having a lot of conversations, and we're putting everything we find out onto our website, and then the support group as well. So look, it's a really tough condition. It's a very tough thing for families.
Yeah.
How amazing to have somebody with Down syndrome WA who has the vision to go, I've just had a conversation with the similarities, to then go, I can't not do something with this. I've got to look into this.
Thank you. I don't know how you don't. For me, when you have two parents in tears on the phone at their wits' end, with nowhere to go. And that's the value of the association, right?
Absolutely. That's the community. That's we need help.
Yeah, because when you're in that point, in that phone call I was on when I came into your office today, when you're at that point, it is us you need. Yeah. You need somebody. And sometimes we can't do anything, but we will do our utmost to try.
Exactly.
And do our best for people, because
sometimes that's all somebody needs, just to be in their corner.
And also hope.
Yep.
Okay, there is someone with me, they're going to stand beside me. And I think that's important, because advocacy is often seen as this adversarial thing, but I don't think it is necessarily. Being someone's advocate is about supporting their journey and, caring. And my team are just the most caring group of humans that you could ever employ. I'm incredibly fortunate to have such an amazing team of people.
But it's also enabling the families to, like you said at the very beginning, to have the possibilities in their life, and for what works for them rather than what works for other people.
Yes. Yeah, and we're strong advocates of the people with Down syndrome as well, and parents sometimes roll their eyes at me because they'll say, I'd love my child to work in an office, and their child's going, I want to work in a fish and chip shop. I'm walking a tightrope here. But we really do honour the wishes of the person with Down syndrome, and obviously of our parents, and finding that balance. And I can tell you, sitting on my chair some days really does feel like sitting on a tightrope, because you feel it, you feel the balance, you feel the pull and push of hopes and dreams, and the young person's rights and responsibilities, and their right to choice and control,
their voice,
and their voice, but then a voice of this amazing family that have raised them, have dreams for them, and I think finding a way to communicate. If anything I've learned in this job is around communication, around listening, and you know, and I can be better at listening, but I'm finding ways to navigate, you know, and I think that's what my team's taught me as well, because they've been around a lot longer than me, is really being not afraid to ask hard questions. And it's okay to ask someone a question, you know, about their child who has a disability. Just be respectful and have a reason. Don't just be inquisitive. Have a reason. You know, if you need to know and there's a reason you need to ask, then most parents are going to tell you really honestly. But if you're just kind of being voyeuristic and you know, don't have a genuine reason for needing that information, don't ask. And whether someone has Down syndrome or not, in reality, or any other disability, it should almost always be secondary to what it is we're dealing with. We should be dealing with the person and their hopes and their dreams and their goals. And then, and you have blue eyes, so okay, what does that mean? Well, maybe something, maybe nothing. You know, you have Down syndrome, what does that mean? Maybe something, maybe nothing. You know, in this instance. And so, yeah, I think it just is about looking at the person. And, you know, the team that we have, they are very person-centered. And that's not about the words written in a book that says, you know, we should all be person-centered. But they are centered around our members. They're centered around our families, the young people with Down syndrome from when they're born to, you know, and as I said, we get invited to all kinds of things, including funerals. You know, we are with people on a journey. You know, and it's a privilege. It's a very trusted position that you sit in for all of our staff, and it's one that we have to remind ourselves regularly that, you know, this is, people put their faith in us, they put their trust in us to have kindness and empathy, but also skill.
That's a huge responsibility to take on. It is.
It really is.
Because sometimes they only need to hear what you have to say, and then you can give answers because you need. It's just, complicated.
It's very complicated, and I will never forget those 2 regression calls. Till as long as I do this job and into whatever career path or whatever I do in the future. Those 2 parents, who I'm very close to now, I'll never forget that first phone call of, you know, that heartfelt, I don't know what to do, you know, and I've got nowhere to go.
We get those calls too, and then you never forget them. And as you said, you know, having an amazing team, we're very lucky here too. So having the support of the team and you know, turning to someone and say, look, we have this problem, let's help this family as a team, and then you find solutions.
Yeah. And if a solution can't be found, what you find is compassion. And sometimes there isn't a solution, but there's always compassion.
Yeah.
Always. And you know what, some days you don't feel like being compassionate, some days you're having a bad day, some days the world, you know, doesn't understand what you do, sometimes everybody wants things for free and the reality is they're not, and you can't sustain an organisation with free things, but you have to develop a compassion and a thought about what their driver is.
What's going on for them?
What place are they sitting in, and what does life look like? And yeah, we're in a fairly tough economic situation for a lot of people, and our gap appears to me to be getting bigger, and that is maybe not recognised widely. You know, where if you're doing well and you work in a sector and you're well paid and, you know, and you can afford all those lovely luxuries that come with particular industries within, you know, this state in particular, compared to, you know, others where, you know, it's challenging. And life with a child with disability, NDIS or not, is not cheap.
No.
It comes with an enormous amount of cost for you and for parents, and there financial costs, there's social costs, there's emotional costs, there's physical costs, and you see those. And I think, and that brings me back to that whole thing about, you know, parent well-being. There's fantastic groups, you know, there's Carers WA and there's all of those amazing groups around, but I think that heartfelt well-being place of understanding or just trying for a second to gather what a person is going through. I mean, I don't have a child with Down syndrome. I do have a beautiful nephew, but I get to see him and play and give him cuddles and, you know, make sure I don't feed him bad things. I want to. But, you know, all the things that you want to do with all of your nieces and nephews and, you know, the people you love. But the reality is I don't stand in those shoes. But a lot of my staff do. And so, yeah, I think the world could be a more compassionate, patient, kind place, and if we stood in those steps, we wouldn't have some of the things that go on in the world. And that's probably a very lovely, naive, simplistic view of the world, but I truly believe in compassion, kindness and empathy, because if we stood there, we'd very rarely get angry. There'd be rarely be frustration, because we would feel heard.
Yeah.
And I think for parents and our young people with Down syndrome, they're often not heard, and other disability, where people are just not heard.
Well, there's still that stigma, in a sense.
100%. Yeah.
You know, this is Beyond Labels, trying to break that stigma down and move forward.
Yeah, and we see it in education still, you know, and there's a lot of great work being done in the education space, and we have a long way to go. We have a huge way to go. And the other one for us, I guess, is we see a lot of challenges is health. And that's, I think, the pace of the sector. the sector is very busy. I mean, health is a phenomenally large body of work and people and activity. And I do think that sometimes our people, particularly those with the inability to possibly communicate for themselves, I think they get lost sometimes, and that doesn't always give them the best outcomes. And they're the kinds of spaces we need to all be working to change and to say, no, actually, you know, and this is where parent advocacy is phenomenal. I can't believe how much effort and heart parents have to put into advocating for their child for the rights that I have every single day and my children have every single day. And that's something we miss. I think we gloss over that, because as parents of children with disability or illness, I mean, you know that you're always going to have, it feels like you're always going to have to fight. It might be a fight to go to, you know, the school of your choice. It might be the right to be admitted to emergency because you know your child and you know this is not what you consider is normal. You know, whatever it is, I'm in awe of the level of advocacy parents put to their children, and all parents to their children, but I see it so much more in this sector and with parents that just advocate every day for their children's rights. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's also something we should all be super mindful of in terms of the care of our parents as well.
Yeah. And in terms of, you know, all the changes within the AS that we are in the middle of, you rely, because I know that the fees for the social groups are low, you know, when they go in outings, to the movies, to, you know, the markets. And so how are you expecting any great changes? I mean, we all...
Wouldn't it be lovely?
Yeah.
Look, I think that on my understanding, and I'm not an expert, and I think we're all still waiting for more information around these changes around foundational supports targeted in general. But I do think that I can understand the driver for, you know, some targeted supports and the need for foundational support. And we do see a number of people within our association who aren't from Australia. And we have unfortunate immigration laws in this country, so really difficult for families with a child with Down syndrome. And we see a lot of families who maybe come and they can't get NDIS. So that I think something like foundational supports has some real value in that space. I hope that what it allows is agencies, big and small, I reiterate, and small, to continue to do the work we do, because we have to acknowledge the value. It may mean us working collaboratively to secure some of that funding. I honestly don't know. What I do know is we must never underestimate the value of grassroots organisations that really do work that can't be done, or I don't see being done when your scale becomes large.
Yeah.
And it's not that people in large scale organisations don't care. I don't believe that. But there's a different mechanism.
Yeah.
There's a very different mechanism within
really different.
a very large scale organisation to what we all do, which is that tailored, very personal approach. And it comes back for me to community. And I think all government has to place a value on the maintenance of community. If we lose community, then we lose connection. And once we lose connection, we see, and we know this, a rise in mental health. We see a rise in illness. We see a lowering of people's self-worth and self-care because you become isolated. And none of those things are good for you.
No.
There's none of that can be good. So I think we're in for some challenges. I'll be interested to see how each state, and being part of obviously a national organisation as well, it'll be interesting to see how each state government approaches foundational supports and how they administer those. I've been fortunate to be in a couple of meetings with a group of other small, largely not-for-profit providers, with a couple of members from the state government, talking about what could it look like in the future, and at least we're having the opportunity to put our voice forward for those, and that's really important. And looking at, where are the gaps, and, and we've had to look internally, and that's why I know that ageing is our gap. My concern is, nowhere do I see ageing mentioned in any of the literature that's come out around foundational support, whether that's targeted or general. That's of deep concern to me, and particularly with a positive ageing community. We really want to make sure there's some funds and some focus on ageing well for people with disability, because that does appear currently to potentially be missing. And we know that after 65 you're no longer in the NDIS and you're in the aged system. That's a tough system to navigate, and if you already have an intellectual disability, trying to navigate that system with or without parents potentially, I think we've got work to do. So look, I hope that it's good. I think its intent is right. I hope its execution is good. Execution is really, really important, that we get that right, and that we listen to the voice of community organisations to say, well, this is what we see and this is what we need.
All right. Yeah. It's so to start, wrapping up. It's been really interesting. A lot of learning. What would you like us and everyone listening and watching, what would you like us to know about people with Down syndrome, living with Down syndrome?
Yeah, I guess the main thing for me is believe in the possibility of what they can offer you. Your business, your sporting group, your community group, your neighbourhood. Believe in the possibility, because they will show you what they have. That for me is the most important thing, is that we believe that people have a right to choose. They have a right to live in a relationship of their choice. They have a right to go to the movies, drink alcohol, smoke cigarettes, do whatever it is they want to do. Now, we wouldn't advocate for any of that, to be, that we want them to choose healthy choices, but it's their choice.
Like everyone else.
We have a choice. I want them to always have choice. Yeah. And be empowered. We really want to keep our capacity building work up to empower them to say, no, No. That's not what I want. What I want is that, not that. Yeah.
Well, that is nothing different that I want for my kids.
Yes.
And you want for your kids. So
Exactly.
it's nothing, special.
Yeah.
And then again, if you want to repeat how everyone can help, where to go, and that every donation counts, and volunteers and skilled volunteers, you, as you said, it's really easy to find you. So
And we'll provide everything.
yes, we will provide everything, every detail, just in case it's going to be there, and your contact details and website, phone number, Facebook page. So we want, this is the intent of this space, to give, this information to the people that can, they have family members with Down syndrome, but people who want to help and understand and educate themselves where to go. So thank you so much, Cassandra, for coming.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. It's been really interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I mean, it's a great platform that you have, and we need a voice, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a voice with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. So everyone listening, just please help. It takes a village, and you really are doing that, So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please, help. And see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.